Chapter 121. The sun was shining warmly for the first time in a long while, so I decided to go outside with a book. I sat down under my usual tree, ready to read a few pages. As I settled in, a few white butterflies began fluttering near the ground. At first, I didn't think much of it. There were always butterflies in the garden, but then something strange caught my attention. A group of butterflies gathered together in one spot. They spread their wings quickly, almost like they were trying to get my attention. I couldn't help but watch as they folded and and unfolded their wings in unison. What is this? When I looked closer, I was shocked to see that the butterflies had arranged themselves into a perfect rectangular shape. As soon as I noticed, their wings began to glow. What's going on with the butterflies? I stared, wide-eyed, as the scene unfolded. Moments later, the butterflies disappeared, leaving a white envelope in their place. It was so unbelievable that I just stood there staring. On the envelope, I noticed a symbol, a white rabbit. Winter, I'll write the contract on my side and send it secretly through a letter. I remembered what Winter told me yesterday, so this was how he intended to contact me. Unexpected, but definitely more charming than a rabbit with a name with a manly voice. I picked up the envelope and rushed back to my room. Sitting at my desk, I carefully sliced it open with a paper knife. Inside, I found two contracts, one for diamond processing and distribution, and another for asset management. There was also a brief handwritten note. I'll pick you up at Hamilton Street tomorrow at 10 p.m. To fulfill the contract, please bring the signed documents with you. Fulfill the contract. I tilted my head, confused, but after rereading the note, I understood. It wasn't just about signing paperwork, it was about meeting in person, a condition he had previously mentioned. So as soon as I sign, we have to meet. I sighed and muttered to myself, well, just think of it as spending a day with a man. After all, this world was originally a romance simulation game. Even if survival was my top priority now, maybe this would turn into a cute romantic episode. I tried to push away the creeping anxiety. The next morning, I called Emily into my room. Help me dress up. Are you going out, miss? Should I call the more skilled maids? No, I'm sneaking out. Sneaking out? Her eyes widened like saucers. There wasn't any serious reason to sneak out. If I told the butler, it would surely reach the Duke or Derek. And then I'd be questioned about meeting a stranger. Way too annoying. While I'm gone, don't let anyone into my room. But if anyone asks, just say I'm feeling unwell today. Will you be back soon? I should be back by evening. While she nervously helped with my makeup, I kept things light-hearted. We finished with a simple look, and I changed into a knee-length sky blue dress. The color paired beautifully with my dark red hair, and the intricate dark blue embroidery perfectly complemented my eyes. Perfect for a date, I thought, smiling proudly at my reflection. How do I look? Pretty? Emily gasped, covering her mouth with both hands. You're absolutely stunning, like a goddess stepping out of a temple mural. I almost laughed at her reaction but felt secretly pleased. All right, go keep watch in in the hall. Be careful not to alert Danina. All set. I prepared to sneak out. Since it was early morning, the mansion was busy with workers and hardly anyone was around. I easily slipped out the back door and made my way toward the smoke field. I planned to use the secret exit, the dog hole, dragging Emily along just in case we run into any knights. I carefully approached the hidden exit. Fortunately, the knights were busy training, and no one noticed. Emily gasped when she saw me parting the bushes with practiced ease. Oh my gosh, miss, how did you even find this place? Just cover it up after I leave. But this feels wrong. Ignoring her, I rolled up my dress, knelt on the ground, and crawled through the hole. It was already close to 10 o'clock, and I was running late. As I crawled out, Emily whispered anxiously behind me, oh my gosh. Once outside, I dusted off my knees and waved at her. I'll be back before dark. I hurried away, leaving my worried maid behind. Soon I reached the deserted alley where Winter had instructed me to meet him. A tall figure was already waiting there. But to my surprise, it wasn't just Winter. Standing beside him was a small child wearing a lion mask. Bon. Why did you bring a kid? I stared awkwardly at the two of them, feeling a little lost. It almost felt like I was going on a date while babysitting. As I kept glancing between them, my eyes met Vinter's. He looked slightly embarrassed. Why didn't you come in disguise today? He asked. Huh? Was I supposed to? You wore one last time, so I thought you would again. Weren't you thinking this was a date? The alley fell silent. Then the kid broke the silence. It's a date, shouted the lion-masked child gleefully. I was completely dumbfounded. So, where are we going? I asked cautiously. We're going to hand out bread, the child chirped. Just then, a white system window popped up in front of me. Main quest, the whereabouts of the lost children. First, go to the slum with the wizard. Would you like to proceed with the quest? Reward, plus 5% winter favorability, plus 50 fame. Accept or decline. Volunteer work, I repeated aloud, doubting my ears. While I was blinking in confusion, Winter scratched his head, looking apologetic. I'm sorry, I didn't explain earlier. I thought you'd come wearing something more practical. There wasn't even time to be embarrassed that I mistook this as a date. Another system message appeared. Main quest will automatically be accepted in 5 seconds. System 5. System 4. This insane game. I hurriedly pressed accept. Immediately, a new window appeared. Would you like to move to Tratan, the quest location, with the help of magic? Yes or no? I clicked yes. Winter extended his hand toward me. We're going to Tratan. It's easier to move with a magician's help. Though I had experienced magical teleportation once before, I hesitated to take his back. I didn't even know where Tratan was. This was my first time hearing the name since arriving in this world. This is a bad sign. Still hesitating, I noticed Winter's outstretched hand again, and the lion-masked child suddenly grabbed my other hand. Biratio, Tratan. The child chanted in strange mangled words. A blinding white light flashed. When I opened my eyes again, we stood in a seagull-filled sky above crashing waves. End of chapter 121. Chapter 122. Where the hell is this place? I looked around, confused. Just moments ago, I had been in the neat, orderly capital. But now, there were lighthouses and sailing ships everywhere. It was all so disorienting. It's Tratan. It's a port city. Winter answered calmly, as though he were used to my confusion. A port city? But it's not near the capital. It's the front line of the Eastern Empire, he explained. I still didn't quite get it. So I asked again, why do we have to come all the way here? Because the damage from the war here is the worst, and I'm focusing on helping this area. The words I wanted to say almost slipped out, but I held them back. I wanted to yell at him, but I kept my frustration inside. I see, I muttered, trying to calm myself. This situation wasn't really Winter's fault. It was the system's order. I just had to follow along, no matter how uncomfortable it felt. We climbed a small bank and headed toward a village in the distance. As we got closer, the village looked devastated. Buildings were half cracked, and roads were in disrepair. There wasn't a soul in sight despite the busy fishing time. The place felt abandoned. It was a stark contrast to the luxurious capital I had known. The aftermath of a war was cruel and unforgiving. I couldn't help but think, well, no matter how powerful a country is, it can't prevent this kind of devastation. But what scared me more was how realistic all of this felt. The normal mode had been all about the hope and brightness of the capital, but here in hard mode, the setting was grim. Why does everything here feel so bleak? I sighed, swallowing my unease. As I looked around, deep in thought, I heard a voice. You're the noble lady who came back, right? I blinked in surprise. It was the lion who had been walking quietly beside me. I raised an eyebrow, surprised. How did you know? Your speech and voice, I remember, he said with a shy smile. You're quite sharp, I said, impressed. The lion chuckled, looking pleased with the compliment. His smile was one of the few things that made me feel a little better. Thank you for what you did back then, I added. I'm alive because of you. If it hadn't been for the lion's intervention, I would have been in serious trouble. Before Winter could strike me with that cane, I would have collapsed from exhaustion and lost all favor with him. The lion's smile grew even wider. I got in big trouble with my teacher after you left. Auntie, you see me as an old lady? I raised an eyebrow at the nickname. Well, I had to call you something, he said, grinning. Then call me Penelope. It's my name. I'm Raon. I named myself after the lion because I like lions the most. I nodded. Okay, Raon. After a brief pause, I returned to the previous topic. Why did you get scolded? Was it because you helped me? Yes, but they also praised me for my discovery. Thanks to you, Miss Penelope. I smiled at his innocence. His excitement was almost infectious. Good for you. Rowan continued, his voice becoming more serious. But after that, my teacher, he was really upset. Why? I asked, curious. He lost my trust when he pointed his cane at the person who helped me. He explained, eyes dropping to the ground. I glanced at the empty space where I had just been walking, watching as a purple favorability gauge appeared above his head. So, is this guilt? Raon tilted his head. The day you came back, he seemed happy. Really? I asked. As soon as you showed up, he started planning where to start volunteering. Raon added, his voice full of childlike enthusiasm. I frowned at the mention of volunteering. I had no intention of dating him, though. I couldn't help but remember that in normal mode I almost got involved in volunteer work, but that was before the ball. Lost in thought, I continued walking until we reached the village. The villagers, ragged and worn, looked up as we approached. Their eyes widened at the sight of a noble lady in a dress accompanied by two masked men. I couldn't help but chuckle at the sight of us. We must have looked odd. Three strangers in the middle of such a rundown place. Winter led us to a quiet part of the village where there was no one around. We stopped in an empty lot. Winter pulled out a small black pocket from his coat. Raon, check if there's anyone around, he instructed. Raon murmured something under his breath, calling out a strange spell. None, he reported. Satisfied, Winter quickly untied the pocket's knot and pulled something small from it. He tossed onto the ground and, boom, a huge table suddenly appeared in front of us. My eyes widened in shock. Winter continued pulling more things out of the pocket. A large awning screen, simple chairs and tables, a, bre- a lot of a large tin can filled with soup, a basket of bread, and a bowl of salad. In no time at all, a makeshift restaurant was set up in the middle of the empty lot. It's a magic shrinking technique, Winter explained awkwardly when he noticed my stunned expression. Just then, the sea breeze blew through, carrying with it the faint scent of fish. A bell began to chime. Raon looked at me with a smile. People are coming. Sure enough, a few moments later, a rugged group of people appeared. The bell had summoned them. Winter encouraged me to start distributing the food. You take the bread, I'll handle the soup. It wasn't hard. I nodded and began handing out the bread. People bowed their heads in thanks as they received it. But after a while, I noticed something strange. Most of the people coming for food weren't adults, they were children, many of them orphans. It was a striking sight. Why are so many children here? I waited until the crowd thinned out a little and then asked Winter, why are there so many children coming for food? He glanced at me with mild surprise before responding. There were orphans. Their parents were killed in the bombings. Most of them are just kids who have no one else to turn to. I fell silent, realizing the gravity of the situation. These children had lost everything. Good families don't come for free food. Winter added, it's seen as a disgrace in the Empire. It made sense now why Winter had been so focused on the front lines. His heart was especially tender toward the children. I remembered earlier, when I had complained about the distance we had traveled, my heart grew heavy. Yes, I said softly, and continued distributing the bread in silence. There was plenty of food, at least. As we neared the end of the line, I noticed something strange. A black-haired child had taken his share of food, but he was back in line again. Is he still hungry? I wondered. But the child didn't take any food this time. He disappeared briefly and came back again, trying to take more bread. I could see that he was trying to take more food than he needed. I was about to hand him another piece when Winter stopped me. Stop, he said sharply. The child froze in fear, then quickly ran away. I stared at his retreating figure, then turned to Winter, puzzled. Didn't you prepare enough food? I asked. Of course I have enough, Winter replied, but it's not just about food. You see, some of these kids are probably hiding food at home, coming back to get more, or they're selling it. I know that, I said with a slight retort. Winter gave me a pointed look. You know, but you didn't care. He looked at him confused. I looked at him confused. You're starting to understand now, aren't you? This is how it works. If you give them more, it never ends. They'll just keep coming back. I glanced at him, feeling a little embarrassed. He had a point, but I still wasn't sure how I felt about it. With a bitter smile, Winter added, back in the day, I wouldn't have starved to death if not for someone like you. I could tell he was speaking from experience. Can't we just give them a little more? They'll need it for the next few days. Winter's expression softened, but his blue eyes held a knowing gleam. You've got a kind heart, but you'll learn soon enough. End of chapter 122. Chapter 123. You've met the mistress. I had come here to find out, but I was shocked again. He had already done volunteer work with Yeju. Yeju. What am I supposed to do now? I had expected this. It was a game story after all. When I realized that Winter might meet Yvonne and bring her back soon, a wave of fear washed over me. This was a life-threatening situation. Unlike me, who felt the gravity of it, he stared at me with unreadable emotions and spoke calmly. If you don't want to take away from the stronger children, eat as much as you can. That was true, but it was still poverty with minimal food at home. Just because you eat a lot today doesn't mean you won't be hungry tomorrow. I shrugged and answered nonchalantly, snapping out of my thoughts. And if you overeat after starving for a few days, you will get sick. Haven't you experienced that? When I saw his eyes glimmer with emotion through the gap in his mask, I realized something had shifted in him. You say that like you've experienced it. Well, what do you think? I squeezed out a smile, one that didn't quite reach my eyes. And now I could almost guess what Winter might be thinking. Was he wondering if I, a woman who became the Emperor's only princess overnight, wasn't satisfied with talking about poverty, or if I was secretly praying for a princess who helps the poor even in hardship? Let's see who I am today. It's no fun if I tell you everything, he responded cryptically. At this point, it didn't matter why he had brought me here to do volunteer work. The game had already fallen into its rhythm. In my mind, Winter Verdandi was marked with a red X. As the meal distribution came to an end, we moved on to the next location. Are you okay? Winter asked, still looking at me with concern, probably because of my unrefined attire. I'm fine, I replied. I could only say that because I was dealing with my own mistakes. Truthfully, I was exhausted from giving out bread without thinking about it too much. We walked through the winding alleyways and made our way to the outskirts of the village. The further we went, the fewer people we saw, and the roads became more desolate. Finally, we reached the edge of the village where a wide plain stretched out, overlooking the sea. There, a cluster of shabby shanties had been built, more like houses than proper buildings. As we passed by, I was taken aback by the even worse conditions than those in the war-torn village. Where are we? The townspeople are forced to use mana here. It's where the people who own it live. People with mana? Do you mean the magisters? No, not exactly. These are people who are too unqualified and unlearned to be called wizards. After the bombing, I brought in a crystal ball to check their mana and conducted a major test. That left me feeling even more lost, as if I were falling deeper into a mystery. It was already known that the Empire had a tendency to reject wizards, but to go as far as to marginalize them in such a difficult situation felt extreme. Why go this far? Isn't this the Inca Empire? I frowned and asked, why don't they lend soldiers? Don't they have lord don't they have a lord? The remnants of the New Kingdom who lost their place in the war hide in the Archina Islands and use magic to attack, Winter explained. Oh, they're hard to approach because the waves are so strong and there are so many canyons. It's a dilemma, he added, pulling something out from his pocket. He came a step closer to me and knelt down. What's this? Before I could back away, he was right in front of me and the weight of something heavy settled around my neck. It's an ancient relic, he said. As soon as he said that, my eyes widened in surprise. Hidden quest, ancient relic of the Magister, complete. You have confirmed the trust of System Wizard. As a reward, Winter's favorability plus 3% has been obtained. I stared at the sudden system window in disbelief, seeing the purple gauge above Winter's head flicker as his favorability toward me increased. When there are, when there is a toxic substance nearby, the color of this relic changes. The more it shakes, the more dangerous it is, so you should avoid it immediately. Winter explained as he handed me the relic. I asked, still dazed, why are you giving this to me? Shouldn't it go to the real hostess? It's for the potential danger that may come up, he replied immediately. I didn't get the answer I expected. This place is more dangerous for outsiders than where we were serving. There may be remnants of the new Lila Kingdom, Winter continued. If you're thirsty, don't drink the water from Loo's well, he warned in a solemn tone. Thank you. I'll be careful, I said, still puzzled by everything. His mask shifted slightly, revealing eyes full of intent, folding at the edges. This place has a small population, so I'm afraid I'll have to distribute the food quickly and return to the capital after a brief pause. He stretched, relieved to be done. He repeated the same process as he did in the previous village, taking out all his shrinking magic from his pocket. The difference here was that the people with mana were able to notice the magic much more easily. I realized he was doing this deliberately to give hope to the disheartened people. After a while, people began to gather again, bringing buckets of food, slowly trickling in. It didn't take long before the line for food at the shelter ended. It looks like it's over now. Please take a seat and rest, lady, Winter said, suddenly bringing me a chair, looking at him curiously. He added, I'd like to speak with the chief here for a moment. The chief? Yes, he's a wizard. I was surprised. A wizard was was the leader of this shanty town. I told him to go ahead without showing too much surprise. Make yourself at home. Thank you, he said, bowing slightly before hurrying down the slope. Relieved to sit down, I sank into the chair with a sigh. Oh, my legs, I moaned, sinking into the seat as the cool sea breeze carried away the exhaustion from my muscles. I scooted the chair closer to the edge of the wall. It felt absurd to be doing this as part of a random volunteering task rather than a date. But as I gazed at the vast sea through the open horizon, I felt strangely at peace. Well, sometimes it's not bad to be nice. The endless blue of the sea met the red hues of the sunset, creating a picturesque scene that felt out of place with the shanty town behind me. The view blurred as I focused on the horizon. If that's the Arcana Island, it was closer than I had thought. As I pondered, I heard children's laughter in the distance. Penelope, someone yelled. Turning around, I saw Raon waving at me, surrounded by children. In his hand was the cane he had been holding earlier, the drops of magic still trailing from it. Is it because he's with his friends in the same situation? Raon, who hadn't used his magic much earlier, seemed very comfortable holding a piece of bread. With a bright smile, he called out, Can I go to the beach under the cliff with my friends for a moment? No, I responded firmly, cutting him off. Why? Ask your teacher. I'm getting permission from Penelope because my teacher isn't here. That seemed reasonable. I hesitated for a moment, wondering if I should let him go. But then I shook my head. Anyway, it's dangerous. Stay and play here. Okay. As I turned back to face the sunset, Raon's excited chatter faded behind me. The sun suddenly brightened, casting a warm glow against the backdrop of the red sunset. Main quest, the whereabouts of the lost children. First task, serving the slum with a wizard complete. As a reward, system grants 5% of Winter's favorability and 50 fame, total fame 460. Is it finally over? It had been a productive day. I glanced at the system window and forced a smile. It was then that I suddenly felt an odd calmness in the air. Turning my head, I noticed something strange. Raon, the area where the children had been crowded earlier, was now empty, save for a soft laugh drifting through the air. End of chapter 123. Chapter 124. I slowly stood up and scanned the area, but Raon was nowhere to be seen. Raon, don't fool around. I descended the cliff and called out again, clenching my teeth. But it wasn't just Raon. Every child who had been nearby was also gone. Raon, the shanty town bathed in the fading light of dusk, felt eerily still. Though it had always been a small community, now it seemed as though everyone had vanished. A sense of fear crept up my spine. Seconds passed, and then I heard footsteps coming faster and faster, as if someone were descending the cliff. Raon, stop playing games and get out here. Frantically, I ran through the shanty town, calling Raon's name. He must be playing hide and seek with the other kids. I tried to think positively, checking behind hut after hut, but no Raon, nowhere. I had no choice but to search the interior of the houses. Raon, I called, peering into the makeshift homes. Most of them were empty, or if someone was inside, they had no answers. Hey, what are you doing? One person shouted. Sorry, sorry. Have you seen a kid with a lion mask? The one I was handing out bread to earlier? I asked urgently. I don't know. Get out now, came the harsh reply. The residents were cold, clearly frightened of outsiders, and they kicked me out without another word. The fear and suspicion were palpable. I searched the remaining houses, but still no sign of Raon. Winter, who had gone to meet the village chief, had not yet returned. Ha, ha, ha. My breath came in ragged gasps as I stood on the sloping entrance of the village. Where the hell did he go? The sun was setting, and a sinking feeling crept in. What if they were taken by someone? A chill ran down my spine. I had been warned that this place was dangerous for outsiders, and the worst thoughts started to flood my mind. What if my favorability with Winter drops again? In that moment, my worry shifted from the missing children to a deep, selfish concern. I realized how fearful I was of losing any progress I had made with Winter, how everything might spiral out of control if things went wrong. But as I stood there, a sense of urgency overtook me. What should I do? I was fighting my panic, trying to think rationally to solve this problem. Then a familiar voice suddenly pierced through my thoughts. Penelope, Raon's voice rang out, clear as day. Can I go with my friends to the beach below the cliff? I froze momentarily, stunned. I had completely forgotten that Raon could use magic to teleport, and with that realization, I immediately turned and sprinted down the slope. The rocks leading down the cliff were natural and uneven, making the descent treacherous, but I wasn't going to let that stop me. I quickly lifted my dress and barefoot leaped from rock to rock, feeling the cool sand beneath my feet as I reached the shore. By the time I made it to the beach, the sun had completely set. Raon, I called out, scanning the vast, dark sand for his small figure. The beach stretched out endlessly, and the darkness made it almost impossible to see anything. Still, I kept running, barefoot, on the cold sand, my heart pounding in my chest. It felt like hours had passed before I spotted movement in the distance. Raon, I yelled again, racing toward the figure. But something wasn't right. The figures ahead, upon recognizing me, started moving hurriedly toward the sea. I gritted my teeth and sprinted faster, narrowing the gap between us. Finally, as I got closer, the shapes became clearer. Six figures, all dressed in black robes, were standing in a circle, surrounding the trapped children, who were huddled together. My heart sank. Layla's new kingdom. I didn't hesitate. Stop! I shouted, charging toward them. The air around them shimmered as they began to chant, their magic rising in a blue light. A strange pattern appeared at their feet, and I realized they were preparing to teleport the children away. I was too far to reach them in time, but I couldn't just stand there. My mind raced. What should I do? Just then, the familiar sound of a system window pinched in my mind. Quest alert. Stop the evil forces attempting to kidnap the children. Using magic spells. Reward. Plus 3% favorability with Winter. Plus 50 fame. Without hesitation, I accepted the quest. The words in the window changed instantly. Use your magic against the evil forces. Magic order. Thunder Pirum. I didn't need to think twice. Thunder Pirum, I shouted, the words leaving my lips with urgency. In an instant, there was a flash of light above their heads, and the sound of thunder cracked across the sky. The blue light around them exploded in a brilliant flash, and they were thrown to the ground groaning in pain. Why is it so powerful? I thought, stunned by the force of the magic. One of the attackers wriggling on the sand pointed toward me. That girl, get rid of her first. Thunder Pirum, I shouted again, and a bolt of lightning struck him. He fell to the sand, his body smoking, and the acrid smell of burning flesh filled the air. I couldn't help but shudder at the sight. This is too much, but I can't stop now. Thunder Pirum, I kept shouting, striking down the three remaining attackers with lightning. One by one, they collapsed, their bodies twitching and smoking. I rushed to the children's side, and there, in the middle of them, was Raon, still unconscious, his lion mask in place. Raon! I cried, gathering him in my arms. He didn't stir at first, but then, just as I was about to check his condition, I felt him flinch. Ah, he groaned, his eyes fluttering open. Raon, are you all right? I whispered urgently. Penelope. His voice was weak, but he was conscious. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, though I couldn't ignore the other children who were still unconscious. I turned, ready to carry Raon back, when a small hand suddenly grabbed the hem of my dress. Back, back, back. A chill ran down my spine. Something was wrong. Before I could react, I heard the unmistakable sound of a dark figure approaching from behind. The moment I turned around, a black-robed figure lunged at me with a sharp glowing weapon. I opened my mouth to shout a spell, but it was too late. In that instant, from my arms, Raon whispered, Piratio. A flash of white light enveloped me. End of chapter 124. Chapter 125. When I opened my eyes again, I was no longer on the beach where I had just been fighting. Instead, I found myself sitting on a stone wall near a temple, the bustling shantytown nowhere in sight. I was in a chair, gazing out at the scenery. The child I had been holding just moments ago was gone, and so was the threatening blade that had been getting closer to me. Where am I? I looked around, utterly confused. Then it hit me, just before I was struck by the kidnapper's blade. Raon had whispered a small incantation. It was the same kind of spell I had used when I first arrived in Tratan. It's a teleportation spell. Raon had cast the spell at the critical moment, moving us to a safer place. I jumped to my feet, heading straight for the edge of the cliff. I wanted to see the beach, but the visibility was poor, and it was too far to make out clearly. Then in the distance, I saw a blue burst of light, the kidnappers. Raon! I shouted in panic, but all I could do was use the only spell the system had provided me. Desperate, I shouted, Thunder Pirum. Just then, a hand reached out and blocked me from stepping any further towards the cliff's edge. I whipped around, startled. The purple gauge bar was the first thing I noticed, followed by the familiar rabbit mask. Finally, I muttered, feeling a flash of heat rise within me. Where had he been all this time? But I clenched my teeth, forcing myself to remain calm. This wasn't the time for anger. Raon's been kidnapped, I said, breathing heavily. We have to stop them. They're over there. I pointed to the blue light in the distance, but Vinter remained eerily calm. Instead of expressing anger over my panicked words, he asked, Are you injured? I'm fine, but Raon, I began, but he interrupted me. You'll be fine. He wasn't worried about the kidnappers at all. He was worried about me. What? I asked, confused. It's too late now. I'll get you back. I couldn't make sense of what he was saying. Then behind Winter, a sudden flash of white light appeared. Children have been kidnapped. Defeat the evil forces. I stared at the system window in disbelief. That's enough, I muttered. Winter wasn't phased. I've been preparing for this. We have plenty of safeguards in place, so there's no need to worry. I wasn't convinced. Was this your plan all along? To use the children as bait and see how I'd react? I demanded, frustration bubbling over. There was a long pause before Winter finally answered. No, that's not it, lady. So what was it? You want me to ignore all of this, pretend there was no contract, and just go back? I shut back, my anger rising. Winter was silent for a long moment, then he sighed deeply and spoke softly. I need to ask you something. I raised an eyebrow, unsure of where this was going. How did you cast alternative magic? He asked. I was speechless. Thunder Pirum is an offensive magic, extremely difficult to control. Even experienced wizards struggle with it. I didn't know how to respond, but you cast it perfectly without any mistakes. How? He asked, pointing to me. I followed his finger and saw the magic necklace Winter had given me earlier, the one that emitted a strange glow. The necklace isn't just for toxicity, it also manipulates mana. There's a change in the nature of the energy, he explained. This bead here, he pointed to the colorful bead in the center of the necklace, should change color after casting magic. But it hasn't. It proves that you have no mana. My mind was racing, but I felt a surge of magic when we were in danger. Isn't that strange? I said, my confusion deepening. I raised my head, meeting Winter's masked gaze. What was he thinking? Your volunteer work was a lie, I said bitterly. This wasn't about that at all, was it? You were testing me to see if I had any connection to Lila. He nodded reluctantly. Magic children have been disappearing every month. I had to verify your connection. I felt a mix of anger and disbelief. And to verify that, you risked the children. You used them as bait. Winter looked uncomfortable but didn't argue. I'm sorry if I offended you, lady, he said, bowing his head. I stared at him dumbfounded. What a piece of work. I couldn't even summon the energy to be angry at him anymore. He had crossed a line I couldn't ignore. You've talked about trust, but you never trusted me at all, I said with a tired smile, my voice hollow. Winter's expression faltered, and he blinked at me, his eyes wide with realization. So what now? Am I off the hook? I sighed. I still don't understand how you're using magic. I don't know, I replied, my voice flat. It's just a spell in my head that I said out loud. I don't care if you don't believe me, I added. I do. Winter replied, his voice steady. At least I know you're not the one hurting the children. I fell silent, lost in my thoughts. Winter seemed to sense the weight of the situation. We have to go. The signal for Raon is getting weaker, he said urgently. A new system window appeared. Main quest, find the lost children. Proceed with the quest. Compensation, 5% favorability from Winter, plus 50 fame. Decline penalty, 10% minus 10% favorability from Winter. Accept or refuse. I stared at the penalty, my frustration rising. Why is this game making me choose now? I muttered under my breath. As much as I didn't want to stay with Winter, the penalty was too high, so I reluctantly clicked accept. I'm coming with you, I said, my voice firm. Winter turned to me, his eyes narrowing. What are you saying? We're looking for the kids. I'll help. I replied. He didn't argue, but instead said, this is my duty as a wizard. Well, now it's my duty too. I shot back, feeling a flicker of defiance. If I go home now, I won't be able to sleep, I added, half to myself. Winter seemed to consider it for a moment before reaching out a hand. You shouldn't have dragged me into this, I muttered, but I took his hand and the system window popped up again. Go to Soliel for the main quest. In an instant, we were standing on the shores of a strange new place. Where is this? I asked, looking around at the unfamiliar surroundings. This is Soliel, a small island near the Arkina Islands. Winter replied, it's used as a stopping point when they can't travel directly. So are we going back to the Arkina Islands? I asked. No, Winter said, his voice grave. Raon's signal is coming from here. He pointed toward a large cliff not far from the beach, where a dark cave loomed ominously. You'll have a hard time if you go in there, he warned. I frowned. I had a bad feeling about this place. End of chapter 125.